little bit to get started. Hi, Inaya, how are you?
Hi, can you hear me all right?
Yes, yes.
I'm
I'm
good.
doing
How are you?
well. We're gonna wait just a second to get started, just for people to pop on. But yeah, how are you today? How's it going?
It's been good. It's been good. How was your day?
Yeah, it's been good. Pretty uneventful, but I'm excited to be here now. Where are you? Are you back at school now?
Yeah, so I'm on campus. I'm just like in an academic building right now. The lighting's a little bit weird, but hopefully
You're
I
all
can.
good. Oh yeah, so we can go ahead and get started. So just on the topic of you being at school, I'm curious. What's being a freshman in college like? Like, how are you enjoying it?
I think it's really interesting and I think a lot more different than high school because there's just a lot more freedom and you can be a lot more involved in different extracurriculars and more just in an academic sense as well. It, my friends and I were talking about this. It just kind of feels like a very long sleepover, which can be really, really fun. The workload though, like is very different from high school, I think. It kind of depends on what kind of high school you went to and what institution you're going to now, but I think I've been doing pretty well in terms of managing it. And so I've been really content right now. And because I moved from, Texas all the way to Massachusetts, that was a really, really big change for me. But I'm actually really enjoying it here. It's a lot colder though, so dealing with that.
Yeah, as a New England native, I can imagine converting to this could be difficult. What are you studying?
So I'm currently a prospective IRPS major, so international relations and political science. So just been doing a lot of political science classes.
That's so fun. What are you taking this semester?
So this semester I'm taking world politics, comparative politics, also an echo poetry class, which is just reading like different poems about nature. And then I'm also taking a peace and justice course, which is also really, really
That's so
cool.
cool. What are you reading in the eco poetry course?
So I guess like the curriculum is like based on you read poems based on the season that you're currently in. So right now we've been reading a lot of winter poems. We just read a poem by Frost called The Woodpile, and so just reading a bunch of like really really fun winter poems and then just discussing them in class. And it's very relaxing. We have a global flora on campus, which is just kind of like a really big like greenhouse. So the next class that we're going to be in, we get to go into the global flora and read poetry and journal a little bit in there. So that'll be really fun.
That sounds really cool. Do you have a favorite poem?
I never really got into poetry that much until this class, so I was really excited. I mean, I like all the poems that we've been reading now. I read this little excerpt by Annie Dillard. I think it's called like The Ponds in Tinker Creek, and it's basically just about like taking risks and stuff and not avoiding the gaps that you find in nature. So I thought that was really, really cool.
What prompted you to take the class if you weren't super into poetry?
I'm a really big like literature geek, but poetry was just something that's like I found that I was a bit distant with it because it is really difficult to interpret. But I remember meeting the professor beforehand, and she was telling me a lot about the class. And one of the big components of this class is bookbinding. Here at Wellesley, like there's a lot of like there's a book arts lab where you can learn how to like make books, print like things, make paper. So she's telling me about that, and I was like immediately sold. I was like, oh, poetry, like nature, making books, like that sounds so much fun. So I took the course. I'm really liking it so far.
It's really neat. Do you write it all? Like, is it your work that you're binding, or is it just like paper?
I'm pretty sure the project that we're going to be doing this semester is actually making paper. I think there's like different like fibers and stuff that we can find like outside on campus that we're going to be using and actually like creating the paper. So I thought that was like really, really cool.
That's so cool. Like doing everything right there. That's so neat. So
Yeah.
eco.
Yeah.
Yeah. How are you liking Wesley? Do you like the all women's environment?
I really do. I feel really comfortable here and safe. It's like a very like it's pretty small in here and it's like out in like the forest, so it's secluded, but there's also like we also have transportation that can take us out into Boston, so I don't feel like I'm just stuck here. I really do like everyone here is like very, very kind and compassionate, and so I feel like it's really easy to find like your people on campus. So,
That's so fun. I know you mentioned earlier really liking the extracurricular aspect of college. What are you involved in outside classes?
It's funny because like after this, I'm gonna go to like a Wellesley equestrian meeting because I've been riding horses my entire life, and so when I found out there was like an equestrian team like on here, I was like, oh, I want to really join that. And so there's a bunch of like different like clubs and organizations, lots of cultural organizations here for everyone. Also lots of like human rights and activists like organizations here as well, and also just like a lot of more sports or outdoorsy kind of organizations as well because we are very like outdoorsy, and so that's I really like everything that they have involved. There's probably an organization for everyone and everyone's interests, and if not, just you can make your own. So it's cool.
That's so fun. So I'm curious also, what's it been like transitioning from living in Texas to Massachusetts? How's that been?
It's actually very different, not just in terms of weather and everything, but I also think because where I lived in Texas, I lived in more of like a smaller town, and so coming here, like I like that I can transition from like a smaller town to like a smaller campus because I feel like it was a lot easier for me to adapt to like smaller situations. But I think here, like there's like I've really been learning how to get into public transportation because in Texas there's really no public transportation or anything. And so just like also I feel like people are different here as well. There's just such a different like sense of like status quo and community here. So it's really, really different, but I've really been enjoying it so far, and I feel like I've only had positive experiences coming here. And I was just really nervous because I thought maybe I wouldn't be able to fit in just being only in Texas my entire life. I'd never moved. And so this was a big risk that I took, but I'm really glad that I took it.
Yeah, that's really great. The public transportation is definitely a great part of the northeastern cities.
Yeah.
Something I appreciate quite a bit.
Yeah.
You're enrolled in the Changemakers 104 course, right? I'm curious, what's your project for that?
So basically, my project is a very like internally based project, right? So I'm kind of looking more into me in this whole transition period of my life, like how I'm going to adapt to that. And I've realized that I want to be able to allocate space and resources for myself here now that I'm kind of living on my own, and how I'm going to adapt to that kind of situation of being able to live on my own and whatnot. Especially coming from like, I feel living in Texas, like things were very dependent. I was very dependent on everything around me. And so I've been really working on that. Also, just allowing myself to rest a lot as well, because, it's been a hard transition, and also it took a lot of like hard work to get here. And so like I really want to be able to relish in the fact that like I am allowed to rest at times, and just giving myself the space and the opportunity to really take in like parts of life that I wasn't able to really enjoy it like before.
That's really lovely. I like that. How have you
Yeah.
been finding it going? Like, what's the biggest challenge that you had doing the 104 course?
Um, I think the biggest challenge that I really encountered was finding a balance between work and just kind of my own personal life and relationships. I honestly realized that I really created such like good relationships here, and I really indulged in human connection. And I realized that that was a very important part to my journey, because I think I went in with this mindset that I was going to have to do everything alone, and I was just going to have to make myself completely isolated and do everything myself. But that is not the case. You can always just like you can always just ask other people for help and be able to like take risks in that way, and you'll find a lot of people who are actually really willing to help. So it's really nice.
Yep. Oh, that's really great. So Sophie's asking if you can tell us a little bit about what you've learned about change making generally.
Oh my God, I feel like I've learned so much just from like Changemakers Institution and everything. I think I've just went about ways in a different way, because I feel like a lot of people think about change making in a way, kind of like how I was discussing, like you have to do everything yourself. And it's kind of like Kat talks about this a lot with the I do, we do paradigm and whatnot. And I feel like cultivating like a community and realizing like what like you're most passionate about and whatever your own hero's journey is, and then kind of finding other people around who are genuinely like wanting and caring to help other people. I feel like that's really, really important about change making, I think, because you can't really do anything alone. You're not going to be able to like build Rome today, and you're not going to be able to solve all these like human rights violations going on around the world, which is why it's really important to cultivate a community like Changemakers Institution to be able to like just really create and co-create just a space where we can all like imagine our ideal like version of society and actually believe that it will happen through the steps that we take, whether they're interpersonal or for the community.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's been one of my favorite parts of the Changemakers Institute. Just like, I don't know, the entire idea that you don't need to be sprinting all the time to get things done. Like, I think was a complete mindset shift from anything I've ever experienced before. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm curious, are there any like global issues that you've been following closely? Like, what are you passionate about right now?
Well, currently I've been just really engaged in the whole Israel-Hamas issue right now that's currently going on. And so I think there's been a lot of demonstrations on campus and whatnot. And there's just so much that this is like a crazy human rights violation that's occurring in our time. And I think whenever we think about our current generation, there's lots of generations that are saying we've gone so far, there really isn't that much to work on. Like there were so many things that happened back in history that we've improved from, and that is true. But I do think that there's a lot of work that needs to keep going, and there's a lot of things that um, just genuinely like we as people in this current generation can really help out in different ways that we thought before. I think a lot of people sometimes get really in the mindset that everything needs to be solved by these like big institutions or political groups or anything, but I feel like we're forgetting a lot about like grassroots organizations and stuff and just people from the bottom up who are able to help. And that's why I follow a lot of the journalists in Gaza right now, like Bisan, and so just seeing the work that they do is just really incredible to take the risk and be able to document what's going on so that there isn't a false narrative that's being, showcased online or in any kind of media space. So I think that's really important to acknowledge these big issues because it's really easy to forget about it whenever you're in a very privileged space yourself.
Yeah, for sure. I honestly, that's part of Changemakers that I've enjoyed too. It's just the idea that like we can accomplish more together than we can apart, and not always is the best step to making change found in this an NGO. Sorry. Yeah. No, I think that part of Kat's philosophy is pretty interesting too. Yeah. Do you have any plans for the future? Like, what do you want to be doing post college next year, whatever?
um I'm not really sure. I feel like being in my first year, I'm really just trying to keep my options open. Like, I want to see what else is out there. Like, something that I went to an informational meeting yesterday about the study abroad program. It's a program that was started in Wellesley, and so very close to you guys. And so, basically it's about like human rights and advocacy and just learning all about that and learning how to get proper human rights training and then being able to go all around the world like in a place that's currently going through a human rights violation and be able to talk to the people there and like see like from the ground up and doing that field work like what what do they imagine like their ideal society to be or like what would they change like being citizens in that community. So I feel like that's definitely work I want to continue or like start during my time here and in the future. So I feel like that's kind of like where my heart is set right now is to do that kind of work.
Yeah, that's super cool. So there's another question from the chat. They're wondering what's an aspect of change making that you think is overlooked.
I think an aspect that is overlooked is I think like the funding and just kind of how a lot of nonprofits can be really corrupt, and this is something that Kat talks about a lot, and how she kind of talks about like the sad parabola a lot, right? Where like you'll find like an issue that's like hot and sexy, and then everyone's just gonna want to like fund that, and then whenever it starts to die down, and people kind of look at these issues as big trends and stuff, like you see in media, like they'll highlight this one big issue, and then they'll move on from it the next day because you can't keep up with every single issue that's going on in the world, which is very understood. And that's why I like the collaborative aspect of change makers because not everyone has to look at the same issue, but everyone can kind of like go forth and look at different things and come together and kind of co-create like an overall solution because there's a lot of big themes that overlap with a lot of the issues that we see today and from history. And so I think funding is always like a big one of those, and people, like I said, always look up to these big institutions to make all the solutions to these problems. And so I feel like instead of like looking towards that and trying to look for like waiting for other people to do things that they could have done a long time ago, I think we should really take it up to ourselves. And as like people, we should be able to care about these humanitarian causes in from funding in these nonprofits and whatnot, like instead of just kind of like looking for like the next nonprofit that's going to view this, it's just like we don't need to always look towards organizations, we can do it ourselves, if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, totally. I was reading an article the other day that touched on that a little bit. It was like the idea of building an organization that appealed to enough people's different personal issues that they wanted to be a part of it and you had a strong enough base while not being like so widespread that you didn't focus on a single issue. I thought it was a really interesting dynamic sort of between the two. Are you a reader? What are you reading right now?
I feel like I have no time to read lately. Like I'm always just like all my classes are super like reading intensive, so I'm always just reading like whatever articles or textbooks that they have me reading. But like in terms of like what I usually like to read, I love to read just like I'm a really like realistic fiction type of person. I don't like sci-fi novels or like fantasy novels, like contrary to a very popular opinion. And so, like, I think last year I read A Thousand Splendid Suns by Khalid Hosseini, which was such an incredible book. Like, I really recommend people read that because it really gives like an overview and just kind of like a really like in-depth description of like what was going on in Afghanistan when the Taliban was under rule. And so there's a lot of things that you can see there. And I think that reading books like that also kind of like help my perspective on change making and seeing these really like destructive global issues that are going on. And you read a book and you might feel out of touch with it because it's like, well, maybe this is just fiction, but like these, these are real consequences and these are real events that are happening and will continue to happen if we do not like step forward and want to do something about it and acknowledge this.
Yeah, that's really cool. My all-time favorite is Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut. It's sort of a similar vibe. It is definitely a little bit like sci-fi, but I like the way I don't typically like the sci-fi fantasy either. I can agree with you on that one. But I think he does a really nice job of balancing, using the sort of like fantastical elements to balance out his real story. He survived the Dresden bombing in World War II. So it's sort of about his experience going through that combined with like sort of fantastical like commentary on society. I think it's really good. I've read it like 6 times.
I'll have to check that one out then whenever I get the time. I'll definitely check that one out.
Yeah, no, I would recommend. It's really good. Do you have any other all-time favorites, books you really liked?
I'm trying to think. I love like old like classics and stuff. One of my favorite books I think is it's called Silas Marner, and it's about this like old man who was I think he was I'm trying to remember. I'm so bad at remembering plots of books, but I think he was accused of stealing gold or something. And so like his entire community and neighborhood hated him and they like despised him, so he isolated himself. And then one day like he looked outside his door and there was like a baby there. And so he took in the baby and like basically this kid he just like brightened his entire life up and made him a better person, which I also thought is also kind of interesting from a change maker's point of view because I think a lot of the times when we're talking about like generations and like what they're doing in order to like kind of help the world, like we kind of like dismiss a lot of the younger generations, but they're actually like so much more involved in like global issues and stuff than I thought. Like even when Kat launched the middle school cohort for change makers, it's like we're all kind of hesitant, like, oh, like maybe these kids just don't know that much about it because I remember I really was not like invested or like knew anything that was going on in the world at their age, but they're actually like so intelligent and just so profound and have so many great amazing ideas on things that like I could totally like they're definitely going to make this world a better place, like I can feel it. And so that's why I really think I like Silas Martyr too, is because that like child like affects one life, like we can affect like someone else's life as well in the same way.
On that same vein, do you have any advice for young women who want to make change?
I think my advice that I would have is honestly, I think a big primary thing with being a change maker is patience because I think I find myself a lot just being really frustrated with like not really seeing that much change. And I think for me, like there's different types of change. Like you can have incremental change or radical change. And I feel like a lot of times I want to strive for radical change and I want really big things to happen. But we really do have to be patient and also just really trusting and believing that change will occur and it will happen as long as we keep moving forward and we keep wanting to work towards these big issues and just being passionate and having a lot of integrity because I also feel that this world really lacks a lot of love. And so as long as we stay very loving and compassionate of others, and just being patient with that process, I think there's a lot more that can be done in that sense than if you were to kind of like jumpstart this institution and get a lot of funding for it and see like maybe some steps, but not like these really huge radical, like I think integral changes. So I think that's my main advice for young change makers for sure.
Yeah, I love that idea of incremental change. This is my big thing is municipal elections. Oh my goodness, it like drives me insane that people don't vote in them. We can do so much over time if we move slowly than if we try and make all of the radical changes all at once.
It's
I completely
true.
agree with you there. Yeah. What else do you have going on today? I know you said you're going to the equestrian club. What does that look like?
I think this is my first equestrian meeting that I've been to. So it's like they were like, oh, it's open for all because every semester they have openings. Last semester, by the time that I wanted to join, it was like already full. So I was like, okay, I got to make sure that I'm going to be there for next semester. And so I'm actually not really sure. I think it's going to be open for people who have like never ridden before, but I feel like I have an upper hand because I've been writing for a very long time in my life. And so that's something I miss also from Texas is because that's like a big culture there, I guess. It's just kind of horse riding, like Western culture as well. And so I never thought that I'd be able to find it here, but I think it'll be really, really cool.
Yeah, I'm excited for you. Do you ride competitively at home?
I I do ride competitively. I usually do different shows. I do like English pleasure riding, and I also do um, kind of pony shows as well. So like it's just like a hackney little pony, and you just go around really really fast, and it's really really fun. It's really really fun. So I really enjoy that. Not sure if they have hackney ponies here, but that would be really cool if they did.
Well, I have my fingers crossed for you. What does the other kind look like? You said it was called English pleasure riding?
Yeah, English pleasure is just kind of like your standard kind of like writing. That's more based on like how you make the horse and yourself look like really, really pretty when writing, I guess. So you usually just like showcase the different gaits of a horse. So you can either do three gated, which is just like walking, trotting, which is like a faster walk, and then cantering is what you kind of imagine like a gallop, but instead of four legs off the ground, it's three. And then for five gate, there's also oh God, I can't remember their names, but they're basically similar, very very similar to trotting. But I just usually do the three gate horses because the horses that I had back home that I trained on and trained primarily do three gates.
That's so neat. Yeah. How'd you get into it? Is that I know you said it's a big thing where you're from, but like, does your family ride? Like, how did that come up?
Honestly, like none of my family is really like into horses. Like my mom, she was really like petrified of animals and like but my dad like he kind of grew up wherever he lived. He grew up kind of like amongst like big land and like lots of animals and stuff, and obviously there's big like horse culture in Texas. So I just remember telling my like parents like I really really want to ride horses and that's something I want to do. And the great thing about it is that it's very accessible in Texas, so we found like a stable that was very close to us, and I built a really really strong relationship with my trainer, and so I haven't looked back ever since.
That's so cool. I know I've read a ton about how like working with animals as a kid helps build compassion. Has that been true in your case?
Oh, I definitely think so. I feel like working with animals and stuff, because we also primarily work with rescue horses as well. So like we rescue horses, and I usually train a lot of the horses. So I've seen like different horses with PTSD. We had a horse who was blind in one eye and stuff. So you really have to like learn to be, I guess, patient and work with them through because animals are real living beings who have like experienced lots of either really good or traumatic things. And so I think that it's been really helpful just like working with animals and just, being able to see like what they need, because I feel like a lot of the times, which is really hard to do with animals because obviously they can't communicate with you. You can't like talk to an animal. And so I feel like just really looking for signs and stuff of like what that animal needs has been really helpful with change making. Because I think another thing that a lot of people kind of overlook in change making is that we believe that like we can come into this community, this already very rich and cultural like community, and think that, oh, because they're going through human rights violations, I have to be the one to like help them. But a lot of the times these communities already have like really really like processed ways of like how to deal with things. And so like instead of going in and wanting to like teach and wanting to be the person with the upper hand. You really need to take a step back and like listen to others and listen what other people have to say. And you can learn a lot from just people, animals, just like anything that's really living. And I think that's is really helpful in terms of just being like empathetic and compassionate towards others.
Yeah, cooperation seems like a really useful skill to have picked up from horses. That's so cool. And I didn't know that rescue horses were a thing. Like it totally makes sense, but I just never considered that before. That's really yeah. Huh. Yeah. So we're sort of coming to the end. What else do you have any parting wisdom, any big pieces of advice that you'd like to give to our viewers?
um I guess like main takeaways would just be like don't I guess I don't know, just I think don't lose hope in the world. I think another thing that has really just been driving me is hope a lot, and that kind of has to do with, you know, being really patient and just being compassionate towards others. It's really easy to be cynical, and it's really easy to just kind of look at the world with a very pessimistic or like half glass empty view. But like no matter what like global issues are also happening in the world, there's also a lot of beauty and there's a lot of peace and justice that can be served. And so that is kind of like we already kind of are living in this ideal society, but we can really just bring it up to the most like to its most forefront potential. And so I think just staying hopeful and just staying really really like passionate and just being really present in today is extremely important for change makers and just for anyone who is living in this earth and wants to live a better life. I think it's very important.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's all I have for you. Yeah, thank you so much for having us.
Thank
Or
you so
for
much for having me.
thank you so much for joining us. Yeah. Yeah. All right, well, we'll see you later.
Okay, see you. Bye.